Now, I wonder if my next guest has had any issues with tights. I doubt it. She seems eminently capable. Explorer Vanessa O'Brien is the first woman in the world to reach Earth's highest and lowest points. In 2012, she scaled Mount Everest, and last year she spent longer than any other woman at Challenger Deep in the Western Pacific's Mariana Trench, the deepest known point in the Earth's seabed. She's one of only 8 women to achieve the Explorer's Grand Slam, having summited the highest peak on every continent and skied the last degree to the North and South Poles. Vanessa was the first woman to set a speed record to climb the 7 summits, earning her a place in the Guinness Book of World Records. Her achievements are all the more impressive, considering that she came to exploring relatively late in life after a 20-year career in international banking. Now she's written a book about her adventures called To the Greatest Heights, Facing Danger, Finding Humility, and Climbing a Mountain of Truth. Vanessa O'Brien, welcome to Times Radio. Now, I mentioned that you turned to exploring after a 20-year career in, ultimately in investment banking. And one of the things you said, and I paraphrase, is mountains don't have glass ceilings, unlike offices. So was that an indication of what propelled you to make this enormous career leap?
Yes, absolutely. One of those wonderful things about mountains is it doesn't discriminate. So it treats men and women exactly the same. Reinhold Messner had a wonderful quote. It was something to the effect of, it doesn't matter who you are. Mountains, you can't take it personally. Mountains aren't fair or unfair. They're just dangerous.
Indeed, and I think you'd also argue that physical strength is perhaps not quite as important as mental strength when you tackle a challenge like that.
Yeah, because these expeditions, if the peak is over 8,000 meters, are 6 to 8 weeks. So much of what keeps you there is willpower and focus and determination, and that's you're really in your head the whole time. So what I find is women are very focused and they keep their sort of eyes on the prize or eyes on the goal, and men get bored really fast, and they struggle with the downtime. And there's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of downtime between acclimatization. There's a lot of downtime with weather. There's, you're just always, there's just setbacks, constant setbacks. So you can't let that derail you or play with your mind.
And do you think that's a skill that women are better at, or men?
Well, it's an endurance exercise overall. So I think women are a little bit better at dealing with the constant setbacks that occur in these harsh conditions, because there's nothing keeping you there but yourself. And it's just too easy to kind of find an excuse to throw in the towel and say, what am I doing? It's just, everything's so unnatural. It's unnatural to sleep on the ground. It's unnatural to sleep in a sleeping bag. It's unnatural to sleep in the cold when you have choices. And, when there's avalanches and then your life is on the line, you're going to constantly give yourself excuses to get out of there. And I think watching what I've seen, and women are always a minority here, is they're usually the last ones to want to leave and the strongest ones to make a case to want to stay.
So moving sort of backwards, if you will, I wondered, you spent these 20 years working in business. Were you an adventurer even then? And if not, what was it that prompted this desire to go to both of the Earth's extremes? And we'll talk about them in more detail in a moment.
Sure. What business really helped me with, one is nobody knows what they want to do when they really first get out of school. So you're just kind of going along and taking internships and jobs and things like that. So
you're taking what you can get, aren't you, basically?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I mean, it's not like somebody lands in that perfect job, right out of school. So, for me, I stumbled into an internship at General Electric, which was Jack Welch's sort of, he was at the helm at the time, but he was a great business leader, and he had some sort of key, principles about how to succeed in business that were quite clever, like, be number 1 or 2 or get out, which meant, look, there's something wrong if you can't command respect in the marketplace. Either you don't have a product people want, which means there's no demand, or you don't have the right price point, which means you can't get the operations to set the price for the product that people want it at, or there's something that makes you not successful if you're not number one or two, and you should reconsider whether that's the business you want to be in. And then he had some really good leadership principles about speed, simplicity, and self-confidence, which were great soft skills.
And which sound like mantras when you take on the sort of adventures that you have.
Yeah, and I found them really helpful because, when is it better to go slow versus fast? Well, if you're a surgeon, I would argue, hey, slow down. You want to get that right. Simplicity. When is it better to make it more complicated? Almost never. Self-confidence. There's nothing better for especially students and children coming up to teach them to look people in the eye and have conviction and be confident in what they're saying. Those are great softer skills to have.
Yeah, and philosophically, all of this works very well for me, but I'd like to know what it is that makes a grown, mature woman successful in her field wake up one day and think, what I really would like to do is climb Everest.
Sure. It's, I'll tell you, it's not unusual to have a midlife crisis.
This is extreme by anyone's standards.
But what's funny is some of the feedback I'm getting on the book. It's coming from both sexes, male and female, about wanting a change and a change in direction. And of course, I never advocate mountaineering, but I advocate getting outside your comfort zone.
Absolutely, but less generally.
Yeah, me specifically.
What happened?
So me specifically, what my catalyst was I was in London. I was in banking. There was that great recession in 2008-9. I'm sure you remember it. People were stuffing.
Oh yeah, we all do.
Yeah, stuffing stuff in the mattresses, Northern Rock. The whole queues. Everything was just a disaster. But at that time, I left for Hong Kong, and I had left banking. I was in a foreign place, and that was a great sort of catalyst for me to look around and think, wow, first time sort of unemployed, taking stock, perhaps inspired by these tall buildings, walking around. I couldn't find my tribe, meaning, I wasn't working. I didn't have children. Most of the women were either moms with small children, so I wasn't fitting into that. Because moms with small children don't have attention spans, so they can't talk to you. It's like they talk to you in a sentence, and then it's like, Jack, don't do that, or John, stop. And it's like, it's horrible. And or women were working, so they'd go off on these trips around Southeast Asia, and you wouldn't see them for like another 3 weeks, and it was like, who are you again? Or there were the tennis players, ladies who lunch, and then they drink like a bottle of wine at lunch, and it's like, oh man, I can't fall down that rabbit hole,
Okay, so there you are, an individual, but I'm still not getting what set you onto the mountain path.
Yeah, so I was trying to find something to do, and I was like, from having worked these incredible hours and been really productive and had these goals and all these things that gave me great feedback, and now suddenly I was lost. And so I started making lists. What am I going to do next? And there I am in this place called the Key Club, for those longtime Hong Kongers. And I was presenting my list of 5 criteria of things I wanted to do, and it was like, nope, it won't be me who cures malaria. Nope, it won't be me who does that next product launch for, durian fruit, that beautiful antioxidants, but smells
stinky
terrible.
Fruit.
Stinky fruit. But
it will be me who climbs
Everest, because somebody said Everest, and I was like, Everest. Oh my God, where is it? How high is it? Like, I vaguely remember, yes, Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary, but I couldn't quite place it. And it was like, wow. But it fit against all those criteria, and it would get me out of my I'm doing nothing right now. And it was a challenge I could sink my teeth into. It gave me a purpose and a goal. The question was, could I do it? I never thought I could at first. And it was all really, really exciting. And I think nobody in my completely close inner circle took me serious at all. I think they all thought, like, right, she's off on a rant, and she'll get over this. Maybe she'll go to New Zealand, see what this is like, and fail, and come back and, find something else to do.
I don't want to run out of time with you, and I've got so many things I want to ask you. So the first has got to be, what's it like? I mean, what sort of training do you have to put in beforehand? And what's it like when you get there? I know you had one failed attempt. I think the weather beat you. Oh, no, actually, it was altitude sickness, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Just tell me, like, what sort of training you have to do. I watched the film Everest, and that was it was called Everest, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yep. There's
the last one. And I realized then that I would never climb Everest if before I'd had any delusions, just because it looks so terrifying. So what do you have to do to prepare yourself for that, and what's it like when you get there?
Okay, so the trick on any high altitude climbs is you're trying to prepare your body for the low oxygen deprivation that you're going to experience. So cardiovascular is key. Anything that you can do to increase what they say VO2 max, but that's the utilization of oxygen.
Like lung capacity.
An incremental exercise. So it could be anything, but you want to get your heart rate up, and you want to be able to do that on an endurance basis. So, and anything. It could be you could do trail running. You could do running. You could just do stairmaster stuff. I like to simulate what I'm doing. So if I'm in the city, I climb tall buildings.
Not on the outside, I presume.
No, I don't have a cape or any sort of costume for that. But inside the buildings, and just over and over again, it can get you a little loopy, because you're going in one direction, up and down in most cases. But it's good. And also in London, they have these subways, so you can go down. The tube, you just take, Hampstead, I think, is probably the deepest. So you can go down 300 stairs or something and up.
So that's the training. Now, what about when you get there?
So when you get there, now I think you've been to Nepal, so maybe you.
I have, but I've walked the foothills. It's not Everest.
So the trek in is like a trek anywhere. You acclimatize, which is generally 300 meters in a day if you're heading up. You climb high, sleep low, so you want to do it slowly, and build. Your body's very smart. It's sensing the oxygen deprivation. So it's, as you're climbing high, you're building naturally more red blood cells, which is great, because your body is doing this for you naturally. So if you do it slowly, your body's catching up with you, and it is building the red blood cells. So you don't need to necessarily take medicines for this. But if you do start to get dizzy, a headache, nausea, things like that, there are Diamox, which is acetazolamide, that can help take the edge off. But your body is doing it naturally if you do it slowly at 300 meters a day.
But it's grueling. It's absolutely grueling. Do you think that your business training helped you on the way, just briefly? Because I want to move on to K2. I want to move on to the Mariana Trench, and I've got 10 minutes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So it did help, but not as much as I thought it would, which is why I had that first failure. So I was way overconfident in the beginning. I, ate the humble pie, and then I recalculated.
And you were determined. And after you conquered Everest, first of all, how did it feel standing up there? I mean, I've only ever seen men standing up there. Although I've put together an anthology of women explorers called Wild Women. And one of the women I featured in there, and I'm really embarrassed that I didn't feature you, but I am doing a second volume. So you're going to definitely be in the second volume. But one of the women I featured was called Junko Tabai.
Oh, love.
Who you'll know was the first woman, I think, to summit Everest. And she was just very funny, because her quote when she got to the top was, it wasn't one of those triumphalist ones that we've heard from, all the many men who've scaled it. But she sort of said, oh, thank heavens, and now I don't have to climb anymore. And that was it. What did you feel?
Yeah, so it's about the size of a king-size mattress. So that's the footprint at the top, and filled with the prayer flags, the Nepalese prayer flags. It's quite beautiful. It's hard to distinguish men and women, because we look the same with our gingerbread man suits or whatever, and our oxygen. But it's beautiful. So what you're looking for, hopefully, is the view. You can see for miles. This is, you've got Roger Daltrey in your head here. It is for miles.
You are at the top of the world, aren't you?
It is just unbelievable. And, when the mountains create that sort of triangle of the shadow on the other mountains, when Everest comes over it, is just, you almost get chills. It's just incredible. And
you mentioned triangle there, and that sort of, in a way, well, first of all, this is Mariella Frostrup on Times Radio. You're listening to me talk to Vanessa O'Brien, the rather spectacular explorer. You mentioned a triangle there. You summit Everest, you look at the beautiful view. I can imagine it's extraordinary, and there must be some sense just of relief, and I've done that, and I don't have to do that again. But you instead decide to go for the greatest challenge of all in mountaineering, the triangle that is K2, where 1 in 4 climbers die, and not necessarily in the ascent, often in the descent. I mean, did anyone try and talk you out of it?
Absolutely. And in fact, increasingly, because it took me 3 consecutive years to get to the summit. So the talking out of was exponential. So, when you don't succeed the first time, it's like, bit of bad luck, you ought to try again. When you don't succeed the second time, people do not want you to go because they really think you have summit fever. So absolutely, in that second year, it was like, do not go. I know what's in your head. You're so determined you're going to not come back. So,
how scared were you? I'm sorry, I'm asking all these questions for my own personal...
Oh, no, not at all. This is because viewers would ask the same. It wasn't fear, because every time I went, I was getting a camp higher, and there were different reasons that things were terminated. The first year was sort of Camp 1, some rock fall. Climate change matters here because things that were frozen to the earth are no longer frozen. So rock fall is increasingly harder for mountaineers today than it was, say, in Sir Chris Bonington's day, when there was really ice and it was cold and frozen. He didn't have to deal with all this that we have to deal with today. So the challenges change, traffic changes, the mountains change, climate changes. So there's different challenges. So that was year 1. Year 2, we had an avalanche up at Camp 3, which wiped out everything.
See, I would be taking those as signs not to continue.
Yeah, and and people do. There's superstition. Superstition with the Sherpa that says the god is either a mountain or the god lives on top of the mountain. Slight deviations there, but they don't believe you can continue with an avalanche. So trying to motivate after against superstition is almost impossible. So. But that third year, I wouldn't say scared. We were the only expedition to succeed that third year, but it's managing risk, and nobody goes to the mountain wanting more risk, but they go trying to trade off the risk return balance, if you will. It's almost like playing odds, but you're playing odds based on knowledge, experience, and if it's a stacked like bar chart, there's always a little bit of luck in there too.
Vanessa, you had the luck, you did it, and then having scaled the highest peak and the most dangerous peak, you turned your eye. That wasn't enough, and not enough adrenaline is what I'm wondering, because you then turned your eye, and I'm really jealous of this trip, I have to say, to the Mariana Trench, and traveled, I think, the deepest you can go in the ocean, about 11 kilometers down, just short of. What took you, to Challenger Deep, which is how you traveled it, and why did you want to do that? And what was it like at the very bottom with all those strange creatures with giant eyes and see-through bodies?
Yeah, so it's almost 11,000, right? So 10,924 meters. So it's the deepest part. It's called Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench. It's in the Western Pacific Ocean, outside of about 200 miles south of Guam. This is a trench, so it's where, if you think about oceanic plates subducting under continental plates, that's what causes a trench in our plate tectonics. It's a fascinating place to go to. I was fascinated by it because there had only been 2 manned missions prior to this particular submersible being able to reinvent itself and go down more than once. So this is the first vehicle ever to go down more than once. The other 2 only went once and came back and never worked again.
And you had some scary technical difficulties,
yes,
didn't you?
I did, absolutely. And so being down there it takes 4 hours to descend. that long. So you get to the bottom. It's like a flight to Portugal. That's what I like to say. 4 hours. You get to the bottom. It's very small because it's a submersible. Only 2 people, a pilot and myself. Our job was to map and survey the bottom of the trench to see if it was flat like a billiard table or whether it sloped in either direction, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fascinating because I remember even when we first hit the bottom, sort of that soft sediment reminded of me almost of what I expect the moon to look like, in that it was just so quiet and surreal, and it just looked almost like moon dust, and just very softly would it come up when we touched the bottom. And there are creatures down there which people weren't sure of initially, because the pressure is just 8 tons of pressure. I mean, people say 292 jumbo jets. It's like, okay, just one on top of you is enough. I don't need the other 291 to imagine that pressure. So creatures are fascinating. It's dark pressure. They don't need spines. They don't need eyes. It's all dark, but they live there.
And tell me, which of your achievements in mountaineering and now in deep sea diving, which are you most proud of, and what do you miss most about home when you're somewhere like that? Because I always thought, if I went to outer space, and I'm going to ask you in a minute if that's your next challenge, but if I went to outer space, I feel like I'd really feel viscerally kind of a longing for home, because you can't feel further away from it. Did you feel that at any point in any of these places?
I think when I'm on expedition, I'm so focused. I'm not actually thinking about home. I'm always thinking about what's ahead, or correcting what's gone wrong. Something always goes wrong. It's just guaranteed to go wrong. So I'm really always focused on adjusting the mission or the goals or wherever we are on the actual expedition. So to be honest, absolutely not thinking about home until we're done, and then I'm thinking, wow, this is great, but where are we going to celebrate?
Does the descent of a mountain, because you've managed to get to the top, does the descent feel interminably long, even though probably the ascent takes longer?
The descent feels very, very long, and it absolutely is the most dangerous. Statistically, 85% die on descent. And if you think about it, it's gravity's pushing you down. Gravity's on your back. So while it takes effort to step up, and that's grueling, the fact that you're knackered and coming down and gravity's on your back pushing you down, it's so easy to slip or fall or, just make that mistake after so many hours. And some of the world's best mountaineers have died just over silly, little technical stuff. And you can see why. In fact, if I look at the Everest season that's happening right now, there's 394 people en route. It's more than 381 that was last season. But in 2019, an actual cause of death is now waiting in a line. That was never a cause of death before.
You're joking. So busy now is. A lot of people are going to have had a very difficult time in this last year. And I wondered, from your experiences, what you'd learned about just keeping going, putting one foot in front of the other, and on a more universal level.
Yeah, absolutely. The lockdown's been tough. I have to say, as a mountaineer, I immediately went into the toolkit of the mountaineer, because, we use the masks to stop the dust and debris coming into the lungs when we're going into base camp, to protect and warm our breath against the cold, dry air. So we had always had buffs or masks. So that was in our essential kit. We had always used hand sanitizer, because those are communicable diseases. Most of the things that are spread are respiratory. And we've always used pulse oximeters to check our oxygen rates. So much of what we were hearing was related to this. Washing our hands, making sure we cough in the elbow, not in the hands itself. There was a lot of similarities, but what I appreciated about being stuck at home is how important it is to keep a diary and keep yourself active, to avoid depression and repetition and things like that. You have to treat yourself at home like you would as if you had a really busy schedule. So you have to schedule things like workouts, right? You know, and depending on the weather, you just have to make space in the home. All those workouts became available on YouTube, and remotely.
Just keeping yourself busy.
Yeah, you have to keep yourself busy.
Just finally and very briefly, because I know Rachel Jewell is waiting tethered to get into the news. Have you got, we've just landed a small helicopter, haven't we, on Mars? It's taking pictures. We can't quite go there ourselves yet. But do you have a challenge left? I mean, you've done all the biggies, haven't you? Is space the next frontier?
Yeah, so Friday past, I was at the Kennedy Space Center. I had seen NASA launch its third mission, its space mission, where it was sending the 4 astronauts up to space. I think it's incredibly exciting what SpaceX is doing, and they're not alone. Blue Origin is doing it. Virgin Galactic's making a lot of progress. I think the commercial space will be advancing in the very near future, if not this year, next year. It's on the horizon.
And will you be jumping on board?
Oh, I would absolutely love to. And there's also, people coming. There was a Dear Moon project. You might have heard of that, where the Japanese entrepreneur invited 8 to 10 people. There'll be opportunities, whether it's lunar, whether it's space flights hitting the Kármán line, and I think that would be amazing to add to the basket of seeing opportunities from afar.
You're a crazy woman, K2. Clearly not high enough for you. What can we do? Thank you so much, Vanessa O'Brien. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I could have carried on for another half hour. Maybe you'll come back and we can do part 2. But thank you so much for joining me on Times Radio. To the greatest